Hello, hello, guys. Brandon Sterling here with Safe Haven Portfolio Management. Clint Richardson is back, the most censored man on the internet, the brain trust of information. We are going to talk about a couple different things today. We're going to talk about foreign trade zones and also how criminals use limited liability companies, but they're not doing it illegally. So we're going to get into that, what that looks like. I'm going to play a clip for you guys, which kind of relates to some recent events that I think you guys will find interesting here. And those that know my system, this might pique your interest as well. All right. Now, this is from Brendan Lee O'Connell's channel. I do not promote everything he says, but I do notice that he had an interesting thing on this video. And this relates to Silicon Valley Bank. This is going to go through their company structure. Now, I'm not saying Trump is going to save the day like Brendan thinks.
For it. The money.
I'm not even saying the cartel, the fentanyl cartel is the reason why SVB failed. It is much bigger than that. Obviously, if you've watched my videos, you know by now, they're one of the regional banks that was over leveraged and had no risk management. It wasn't just because people pulled out their money.
I want you to look at what Silicon Valley Bank bought in 2021. Boston Private Bank and Trust Company is a registered company in the state of New Hampshire. Yeah, now you're getting it. It's got a big, beautiful office in Boston, Massachusetts.
I notice he's saying that this bank that they owned, the bank itself, was a trust. And like I was displaying on my last video with Beth, banks are trusts.
It's befitting a giant multi-billion-dollar company. However, its agent is CT Corporation System.
Now look at this, the agent, that's just referring to the registered agent, basically someone that represents them in receiving mail and correspondence, typically for legal notices or notices from the state, wherever this is registered.
In Concord.
And notice this is a foreign profit corporation, the company itself.
New Hampshire. That's just up the road from Bedford, where Bill Shaheen and all the gang hang out. Now you're getting it. So what exactly is an agent in relation to a corporate financial structure? An LLC registered agent is an individual or entity designated by an active company.
I'm gonna slow down the speed a little bit just so you guys can hear his accent. He talks fast already, so I don't think I need to speed it up too much.
Such as a limited liability company or a corporation or any other entity type to receive service of process notices, government correspondence, and compliance-related documents on behalf of the company.
And by the way, guys, I just rolled out a new service. For some of you guys in certain states, I do have a registered agent service for LLCs. My company will be your registered agent for your company.
And let's also be clear here. You, whoever's listening, are the registered agent for service of process for the person that you represent when you do commerce in the United States. Clint Richardson, I am the agent, okay? When I go to court, I either appear as Clint Richardson or as its agent, or I hire an attorney. Attorney and agent are similar terms. Okay, so we're not really doing anything but putting one person aside that we're in bond and surety and not using it, and setting up another one that we're not in bond and surety to and using it, just like they do.
Yeah, and don't get carried away with the whole agent thing in court. I've seen that fail for people where they say, I'm not blah, blah, blah. I'm not
No,
Brandon
you have
Sterling.
you have to have extreme knowledge for that.
Yeah, so don't mess around with that.
While generally the term agent means someone authorized to represent an individual or an entity or enter into transactions for an individual or an entity, registered agents don't have a similar mandate. The registered agent for an LLC has one primary function: to be an agent for service of process, as well as receiving other important correspondence on behalf of the company. Additionally, a registered agent must promptly forward such materials to an active company, such as an LLC, corporation, or any other entity type.
So
Boston Private Equity and Trust.
One other aspect about the agent, when you go to the law of agency or a treatise on the law of agency, anything that's about agency, the most important maxim that applies here, whereas again, you're bond and surety because you're the agent, but you're acting as the person, whereas if you're just the agent, that's different, or you're the signatory, that's different. So the maxim of law is that I'm going to paraphrase here, is that the agent is not responsible for the actions of the person. But if you're being the person, then you are responsible. The agent is not the attorney, therefore, to put it in proper terms, the attorney is never going to be in trouble for who he represents in court. That's why when you represent the person in court as the agent, you can't get in trouble for. But that, again, you don't want to try that, right? Over
Right.
here, though, you're appearing as the person in bond, in surety, in indenture, which is the actual word you should be using. That's what a birth certificate does. And therefore, you are responsible. So the difference here is not night and day, because it's practically the same thing. It's just that the responsibility or the agency aspect of it changes. You're not putting yourself up as essentially collateral.
Exactly right. There's no liability that comes with being a registered agent.
Limited
Trust, and remember,
liability.
it is a trust. A front is a multi-billion-dollar corporation. And, trusts are used to hide money, just saying. If this
Now, I just want to caution because some people are getting confused. I'm anticipating a trust is not a corporation, but the way that they're using this bank, the trust is involved with a corporation. So don't get that confused. The trusts that we use, they're not corporations. They're
So
just
what,
trusts.
the bank funnels it into the trust company? Is that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
This
Okay.
giant multi-billion-dollar corporation was to receive a notice for an audit or any legal document, the paperwork would be served at that dinky little office. It has a little whiteboard on the door because no one is even there. Registered agents for dodgy little companies look like that. And gigantic drug money laundering fronts. Not a multi-billion-dollar legitimate financial services company and trust. No one raised an eyebrow because New Hampshire is run by a cartel and no one expects any auditing anytime.
Actually, let me go back and play this little clip.
Well, but there again, that's what I thought when I first started this. I'm like, you're telling me you want me to open a thing in another state and not even I mean, it's just exactly what he described. That was my opinion. That was my belief system before you explained it to me. And I really want people to understand this is how it works. You're it is not criminal. It appears, and they use it for criminal purposes, but you don't have to. That's the
Yeah.
thing. It's you're entrained to think this is wrong, and yet it's older than anything we have. I mean, I can't stress this enough.
Yeah. And again, we're not advocating you go hire some public registered agent. Either I show you guys how to become your own private registered agent, or you can use my service for even more anonymity. But anyways, let's continue.
And it involves this little crappy office block in Concord, New Hampshire, USA. What is that little office block? That's the home of CT Corporation System. Wow, you'd think this giant multi-billion-dollar private equity fund would have a better office. Looks like one of those dodgy little offices
So he's talking about how this bank is using this random little office as a registered agent address.
at a Panama or, the Virgin Islands or, I don't know, the Cayman Islands, run by some 78-year-old couple in them highlands somewhere. I mean, come on, you can see where this is going. Wait for it. So what am I getting at? Silicon Valley Bank is a giant depository of New Hampshire drug money. Only a tiny portion of the money was insured and under 250,000 US dollars. The rest of the deposits, 97% of them, are giant drug money accounts in the billions, and the cartel started pulling it out. Why? To punish naughty leftist progressive equity and inclusion infatuated Israeli startups who
Look, it's a little more involved than what Brennan can see.
hate BB? Could that be it? I don't think so. No, we put to you the feds are after the money due to Mike Gill's revelations and the infestation of corrupt politicians have
And by the way, Mike Gill, he's working with the feds. He's compromised. He's not what people think. But anyways, this is a whole different conversation. But you guys get the point. How they're using a registered agent is pretty much almost similar to what we're doing, a little different, but you guys get the picture.
Without the massive crime. I mean,
Right.
that's why I say it's a tool. The
Exactly.
tool can be used for all kinds of purposes. It's
Yeah.
time we start using it for good. But again, I mean, I say again, this is why we're actually afraid to even share this. Both, I mean, I know you feel the same way. You could be teaching some horrible person out there how to commit crimes and get away with it. And I don't like that feeling of being in that position. But
Yeah.
you know, but again, I guess you can't have good without evil, right? So I don't know.
Yeah.
Just it's a hard position to be in.
And one more caveat on the registered agent thing, in particular, Silicon Valley Bank, one of their banks that they owned, that trust bank I was telling you guys about, they use another LLC to be their registered agent for even more anonymity. And that's essentially what I'm offering as a service for you guys in some states. So that's an added caveat. Now, let's get into the other part. What we're going to talk about is how politicians, Trump, the Bidens, they're using LLCs and trusts as well. Now, Trump is a little more public in the way he uses some of his LLCs just because his business is more involved with public accommodations like hotels, right? So you can only say so private. But the Bidens, they're completely private with their use.
You couldn't have a casino in Vegas or Atlantic City without being public, for instance.
Exactly.
Right? You have to be under the gaming commission and all that. And of course, if you have a casino, you have ties with organized crime. So it's not like we're saying he's innocent or good. It's just,
Yeah.
you know, yeah. Basically what happens, I called up Brandon and I said, look, I just got done watching the news, which I hate, but sometimes, and it was like, this overwhelming evidence of how all these LLCs were used by Biden, and they're paying off his family from foreign LLCs and trusts and all this stuff. And they're talking about it because they know nobody knows what the hell it means, right? And it's blatant, it's obvious, it's the records are there, someone has them. And then you have Trump, who's in the public. So the Bidens, you're watching the news all the time. They're talking about how bad Hunter Biden is, da 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 da.
Yeah.
But then everywhere else, all you hear is Trump, 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 Trump. Well, I'm like, Brandon, Trump's in the public, but the Bidens are in the private. I mean, they have no reason to be scrutinized or run through the ringer. And my opinion is this is why they're not. My opinion is that it's going to continue for Trump, but for the Bidens, it's just going to quietly, like everything else, go under the rug, right under the carpet, because they're not going to investigate because it's private. But my question then is, and the way I understand it is, unless you're committing some evil, even against the United States, well then yeah, you can get away. So unless if they've committed treason or some other form of evil against the master corporation, then I think you'd have a problem. But I'm not even sure that exists anymore.
Right.
So that's kind of how we got the idea of this was hey, we've got Biden in the private and Trump in the public. Who's getting run through the ringer? And then, of course, Trump could easily expose all of his private stuff, but he doesn't because he's got a bunch too, right?
Yeah. And a little before we get into the full minutia, here they're describing what an LLC is. And notice now they're talking about taxes. First, income can pass through, quote unquote, the LLC to the owner's individual tax returns. They kind of misunderstand the point, but notice that they're saying that an LLC is a pass through. Exactly.
Something you say all the time.
Exactly. Which means the business gets taxed at the individual personal income tax rate. But again, that's only if you disperse payment.
It's only if you're the owner. But what do we say? What does Rockefeller say? Oh, nothing, right?
Oh, nothing, control everything.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to go to your personal checking account, let's say, and then that gets converted to your personal tax. And a lot of state statutes and even the federal level, the LLC doesn't have to be the taxpayer itself, right? And that's what they're basically demonstrating without knowing what they're saying because they're CNBC. So, okay. So, yeah, Trump uses a bevy of LLCs to house and manage his assets, which, again, is smart. As many wealthy individuals, businesses do, particularly in real estate. Yeah, typically most real estate investors, they're going to have one LLC for each property. In some cases, you do want to do that. In some cases, it's unnecessary. It depends on your guys' situation. But as you can see, the Mar-a-Lago, the famous Mar-a-Lago, is under an LLC structure. So are his golf courses, licensing deals, one of his helicopters, and some of his bank accounts, right? Sometimes we just use LLCs for bank accounts. Notice that. That's what Trump does. That's what we do sometimes, depending on your
See, now,
situation.
now your first instinct is to be like, ah, this is criminal. But it's not. That's
This
the
is what it's
point.
for.
The point is, we're trying to teach everybody else and get into ourselves. It's not. I mean, and there's no reason that you have to make it bad or illegal. You just, I
Yeah,
just can't stress enough because the initial reaction is always going to be, man, these bastards.
exactly.
We're stuck in the matrix and they're not. How is it?
Yeah,
Well, okay,
not fair.
yeah, exactly.
It is fair because they're playing within the sandbox, just
Uh,
like we can do.
it's simply a matter of willful ignorance. As long as you stay
Yeah,
willful ignorant, you're gonna be a taxpayer.
look at this. If he's not using his personal income tax returns, says blah, 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 we're never going to know how much he's making or not making. Oh, look at that.
I got something right.
Ah. More than half of the LLCs that Trump reported to the Federal Election Commission were also registered in Delaware, which, by the way, don't do that, guys. Delaware
Yeah.
is not a good state.
No, this is like the UCC thing. We don't,
Yeah,
it's not really made for you. It's made for evil corporations with each other and all that, putting liens on things. That's not for us, okay?
no,
That's the Uniform Law Commission that's trying to uniform, Unidroit and all these things. When you're talking about that, yeah, I mean, it's just Delaware. I don't know. It's like 70% of corporations are in Delaware, but those are big, huge
yeah,
corporations. Not what we're trying to go. We're trying to have anonymity and to fit in, but not with that mass of you know public corporations.
yeah, exactly. And some people think Delaware or Wyoming, they're the best states to file because it doesn't require LLCs to publish any financial information, disclose their owner's identity. But actually, Wyoming just changed. Technically, do now. But we can actually get these same exact benefits in other states that you guys have probably never thought of. So as you can see, he's using LLCs pretty much the same way that we do. Some of them, they are public, and the ones that are public, they're getting scrutinized in the news, right? But this reporter admits we can't find half the records because the way he's using the LLCs. Notice that.
Well, but see, here's another perfect example of why myself and Brandon, again, we're doing this against our best interest, for the best interest of all of you, but really against our best interest. I don't want you to know where my corporation or my company is. I don't want you to know where my private business. I don't want you to know these things, and yet
Right.
it's really hard to talk about this without actually getting into your own private stuff. So, I mean, like I said, we're in a position here where we shouldn't even be doing this. I mean, it's such a weird thing, and I completely understand why they keep it private because it's about. If you look up privacy, the definition is secrecy. For God's sake.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So now they describe Trump's allocations, his 500 LLCs, as the web of LLCs. Look, they also say the same thing about the Biden family.
Respect.
Right. I mean, gosh, they're smart. So, anyways, Biden family received millions of dollars from foreign services that we all know of, right? We've all heard of that. Bank records show the Biden family, their business associates, and their companies received over 10 million from foreign nationals and their related companies. Okay, but again, that's only part of the picture. We don't see the companies that they don't actually own but control. And by the way, they're not doing anything illegal, Hunter and Biden, when it comes to this. As far as the use of the companies, right? So, but a lot of people don't understand, and they think, oh, they're not going to get away with it. They're going to get arrested.
It feels illegal because it's not something that we're privy to, right? We're not taught this. So
This sends something to Clint actually recently that might disappoint some of the QBs. They think that Hunter's going away, he's going to jail. But
See, I will take that bet. I say nothing's gonna happen.
you know what? I would put a sizable bit on that too. Um, I don't think that's gonna happen. But let's see if I can find that article. For some reason, I can't find it in the text that I sent. Let's see here. Aha. This is kind of what I was showing you, Clint. Basically, what I sent Clint yesterday was that the IRS just dropped their investigation under Biden out of nowhere. And by the way, this investigation has been going on for quite some years, even before people knew. But this one's kind of related. IRS whistleblower in Hunter Biden's investigation removed from probe, his attorney says. So as you can see, this is a big nothing burger. This actually came out today. So they're a little late to the party, CBS, but you guys get the idea. This is going nowhere. Like Clint was saying, it's a big nothing burger.
Well, it was that the IRS withdrew the whole investigation, wasn't it?
That's what I sent you. Yeah, I can't find
Yeah.
it. Yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah. So, anyways, nothing's gonna happen. Don't believe these cubies. The
Yeah,
hopium.
dude. It's been this way since I can remember. All 15 or so years that I've been around in this movement, there's always been some form of QB. There's always been some form of group that's the white hats or whatever, that it's just trust in the system or trust in it's don't trust in people who predict or no. I'm sorry, but how many times can we fall for the same pretty much scheme
Right.
revamped in a new package? What's going to be next? We have Q, we have the Galactic Federation, we have the trillion or quadrillionaire who's going to suddenly put all the money in the market and everything's going to change. I mean, come on. I mean, how many times can you rebrand the same hope? It's just at some point I mean, I'm kind of becoming a fan of the saying that God only helps those who help themselves here. Let's stop with the hope and start acting on our own behalf in order to help each other find what we're looking for, My happiness, your happiness does not depend on whether Hunter Biden goes to jail or whether he is free to have more hookers. I'm sorry, or drugs. It does not matter in the grand scheme of my and your happiness and our privacy together. I'm sorry, it doesn't matter. So let's news is not healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I always call the news noise, especially when dealing with the financial stuff. Just shut it off.
In this case, though, it sure makes a hell of an example of how things really work.
Well, as much as we're ripping on mainstream, we should also address that you should shut off all these Telegram channels, constantly putting out fear porn and, oh, this is going to happen, the CBDC or whatever, tomorrow. And then they sell you gold and silver, or at least try to. So stay away from that. This bunch of noise. I'm never going to release headlines on my Telegram channel and be like, oh, look. I mean, look, I don't care what news or law passes. Nothing's going to change my system. So anyways, all right. So the next segment we want to get into is something that Clint actually wanted to talk about. This is foreign trade zones. So this is one of Clint's specialties in his research. I think is a fascinating example of how we can be foreign while still being in America, but not. It's very interesting.
A very, very good example of how foreign means private, or foreign means outside of a jurisdiction.
Yeah, so Salt Lake is actually a really good example of one of these foreign trade zones. And you guys might have heard of it before, especially if you've watched some of Clint's old content. I believe one of his nation state videos, he did talk about how there are foreign trade zones in places like South America where a lot of corporations set up factories to get outside of labor laws, all sorts of regulation, because in the foreign trade zone, you're private, you're not part of that country. So you get around a lot of that regulation. And so it's more optimal for these corporations to set up the factories there as far as profitability goes for them.
Now, the one thing I didn't understand about a foreign trade zone is that it's a zone, and it's not just a place or a building or a factory or a warehouse or even a port. It's a zone. It's like a jurisdiction almost. It's like a it's almost like a black hole in the middle of the jurisdiction, and
Yeah.
it's private. And it turns out a lot of us probably live in a foreign trade zone. We don't even know it. So it's a
Yeah.
potentiality, something you can access into if you're approved and part of the club, right?
Yeah, exactly right. And before we get into this, I had a refresher in my mind, back to the Silicon Valley Bank thing and that trust bank that they owned. Uh, they don't have any of the shareholders as the members of the LLCs that I was just showing you guys. They have a nominee or another LLC in place of themselves. So they're, again, it's just an example of how you can own nothing, control everything. And then the LLC that owns the LLC, they have the nominee, and typically they just use a lawyer for the nominee, just the dummy owner that just basically acts on their behalf, that's willing to go public. Um, that's how they do it. Now, my system's a little different, but you get the idea. So, all right, so back to the foreign trade zone. Yeah, I mean, Salt Lake, it's a pretty big area. We got all sorts of highways, which, by the way, this is telling you all these highways in Salt Lake area, they're part of the foreign trade zone. You're in international commerce on the highway. And I already hear some of the sovereign people, well, it's always been like, oh, okay, let's slow down here. But anyways, so yeah, 1,700 miles of railroad tracks that converge in the Salt Lake to Ogden. Ogden's about, I don't know, 45 minutes away from Salt Lake. So it's a big zone, very wide, very long. So yeah, locating or expanding your company's operations into a foreign trade zone is a smart business strategy. This is marketing from Salt Lake City. This is their website. When operating from an FTZ, your company gains a distinct competitive advantage by receiving cost reductions in custom duties and fees. Notice that you get around the customs. Why is that?
And yet customs is responsible for it. Customs ultimately is who's overseeing it. But I mean, just because you're part of the United States Customs does not mean that you have the jurisdiction of the United States necessarily. You know, you're overseeing a place that it's hard to explain, right? It's privacy, but it's very much like what you would be doing if you're acting in the private. It's just that they've
Exactly.
created this massive zone so that people like, I mean, if you think about it though, what does this mean? This means that the Capitol building, the legislature of Utah is in a foreign trade frickin' zone. I mean, think about that. All the governors, everything that's governmental is based in Salt Lake City. Guess what? They're all in a foreign trade zone. Who knows what part of government itself is in the? I mean, we don't know. We're not privy to it.
Well, what's interesting is Salt Lake, they have an area called unincorporated Salt Lake, and that covers different parts of the city. So again, that's another example of how they're layering privacy. So anyways, and this was in the FTC. So yeah, I mean, basically they're doing what we're doing on a much more macro scale, right? Not saying we need to go this far. I mean, we don't. But anyways, so yeah, look at this. You may be able to defer any applicable customs duties and federal excise tax, and the merchant leaves the zone can be consumed in the US. It's an excellent way to lower the cost of holding inventory until you're ready to ship to market. FTZ benefits include no time constraints on storage, satisfy exportation requirements, increase security, and lower insurance costs. Again, because when you're in this little liability in the FTZ, the actual rails are going to be more in your favor. So anyways, potentially avoid supply chain delays. Notice that. Reduce dutiful tariff on imported parts when assembled and finished parts. Consolidate customs reporting, reduce fees with direct delivery and weekly entry. All right. So they even got the savings calculator, which is hosted by the
So-
Rockefeller Group.
No, I didn't even see that.
Yeah.
What's interesting about that again, and this is the part I think we really need to go back to what it says there. It says it's private in the zone, in the private zone, the foreign trade zone, until when?
It leaves.
Until it leaves the zone. In other words, until you use a federal system like the mail, right? You
Right.
put it in the mail. Now you're acting publicly. Now you're going to go back into and have to be aware of all the laws and rules. So, for instance, if you send a package, they say, does this contain batteries, acid, drugs, guns, ammunition, explosives, right? All of that stuff. Now you have to become okay. Well, yes. Now that I'm not private anymore because I've come out of the zone and I'm sending my goods, but when I'm receiving the goods, I don't know, like fentanyl or who knows what, right? Maybe people, maybe a little human trafficking, maybe child. I mean, it is the Mormon Church after a while here,
Right.
and that scares me the most. The Mormon Church is freaking in the known child abuser is in the freaking foreign trade zone, and that's really scary. But yeah, I mean, think about it that way, where this applies to you very much. That yes, you can act private until you act public. When you're in the public, you need something to act through.
Yeah.
And so that's what they're going to do. They're going to have some other company that they send the goods to from the foreign trade zone, and it's coming from another company. And then the company over here handles it and they send it to another company. That's why you have this trail of companies, not corporations necessarily, that do business as. And, the whole thing is, it's a perfect example of how you can operate, but again, just beware that you don't allow it to consume your soul and go over to the dark side, right?
Right. What we were saying earlier before we started this call, Clint and I were discussing, look, I mean, we're doing what we can using this system, but this isn't the end all be all. We do have an exit strategy. So
Yeah.
that's always the end
This
goal,
is
right?
the exit. And when he says exit strategy, people talk about prepping, and in a way, this is prepping because, see, my goal is to again form get some land, figure out how to be completely private on the land, whereas over here, anytime we need to be, everything's over here. We enter through a company, we leave, right? But then our lifestyle, what we do on a regular basis, now we're doing what even the Bible commands. We're living the good life. We're living pure, we're living charitably, we're living whatever. And anything that the monastery sells, it does through a company that's completely detached from the monastery, right? I can't tell you how important that is to me for you to understand that what we're teaching is not, I haven't become corrupt. I haven't forgotten what I've written. I haven't forgotten what I've studied. I'm trying to tell you you don't just go from one to the other. Just to say, okay, I'm a man of God now. You're always a man of God. It's just that you've been corrupted. To uncorrupt, you have to take it in step. You can't just, I'll just give you an example. What good is it going to do you to sell everything, as the Bible says, for instance, when you've got nothing to do with what are you going to do with the money? What are you going to do? How are you going to is it public money? Is it private money? What are you going to do if you have nothing to reinvest it in? If you can't reinvest in something that preserves a godly Christ-like way of life, if that's what you're in this for, like I am, and a private society in whatever name you want to put on it, that's not New World Order, then that's what we're working for. But you have to do it in steps. This is the step. This is like the big step that I've been looking for that allows us to get to where we want to get. This is not the final end all being that we're looking for. It is the step to get to a place where we can be together, be the remnant, if you will, that that finds peace, happiness, love, and forgiveness and charity. If that's your goal, then you're in the right place. But then again, if it's not your goal, you know, you could do the same thing and be successful in business. So there's that too. I'm not saying one is right or wrong. I'm just saying that's my goal. So whatever your goal is, that's something you got to talk. Let's keep it with you and your maker, and then whatever Brandon can help.
Yeah. So now look at this. To take advantage of the SLC foreign trade zone, your business must submit an application and qualify for membership. Doesn't that sound like a PMA?
Membership.
Now notice this. I found this at the end. Businesses not located within the physical location of FTZ number 30, the one in Salt Lake, simply submit a special subzone application. So you can still be part of the PMA, even if you're not within this FTZ, and still get the benefits as part of the membership.
So it's not even a physical location as much as it is a imaginary thing. I don't know.
Well, it's the way you're using it.
Well, I mean, it's all imaginary, so I guess you just have
Right.
to take it with a grain of salt, right? It's just
Yeah, look at this, how it connects to LA, San Fran, Seattle.
it's
Very interesting.
frightening. I'm sorry, but this is the way crime is done. I mean, how can you not see it? And then, I mean, you can ignore it, I guess, but how can you ignore this? Especially when in my video, this guy's talking about how they can use child labor and do all these horrible things, these horrible unions, and they're paying them, $2 an hour, and just he's taking all their mineral rights and doing it. It's horrible to hear these psychopath business people talking about how they use foreign trade zones in other, countries,
Yeah.
Central Americans, Africa, wherever, but I say again, it doesn't have to be that way, right?
Right. We could go the opposite way, use it for good. So eventually maybe we can get to that point. But
Right.
with FTZs, but again, we're just using FTZ as a macro example of how the private is being used in your backyard in a lot of cases. Notice that was FTZ number 30. Imagine how many others there are in the US alone, let alone worldwide. So
Plus
anyways, thought that was
the fact that you're in a private zone, you don't even know it.
right. That's the thing. This stuff isn't, I mean, this obviously is not gonna be taught. So yeah, I thought that was interesting for you guys. So now with all that said, we'll open up the Q&A. I do have about 15 minutes left. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to pop in and we'll get your questions sorted out. If not, I'm gonna go get some dinner.
Here's a question. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Clint, I'm wondering, is the private zone an alternative to post office or something? Is that what you were saying?
No. It says that everything is basically happening foreign or private from the United States jurisdiction. It's overseen by customs. But once you, let's say I'm a company and I import some parts and I put things together in the private trade zone, but then once I utilize part of the United States commercial system, like the post office, I have to be aware now that I'm entering back into the public jurisdiction. That's what it's saying, is that everything remains private until you use something public, is what it's basically saying. So I just wanted to make sure that people understood that you're private as long as you're not using a public service. I mean, that's basically or public commerce. That's basically what it boils down to. And it's the same thing in these foreign trade zones. You're out of their jurisdiction until you use the post office, a personal bank, whatever it has to do with that person or a commercial venue of the United States. And remember, United States is interstate commerce. So the second you send something interstate, you've entered into, you have to be aware of what you're doing. And if you're doing something illegal, or even if you're doing something lawful that's illegal in the United States, like if you're in the cannabis business, for instance, right? You could be doing anything you want regarding it uh, in the foreign trade zone, but the second you try to ship a bunch of a bunch of
Pounds of weight.
right, you're suddenly now depending on a public service where it's illegal. So hopefully
Right.
that answers the question.
Yeah, notice that. Even with the legalization and all that in the States, as long as you stay within that state in the cannabis business and you don't try to do interstate commerce, you're foreign from the federal law on banning cannabis, right? As a Schedule 1 or Schedule 3. I can't remember which one it is, but yeah, that's a really good example too. So, and by the way, the post office, a lot of people get hung up on that, especially in the sovereignty circles. It's not private at all. Like Clint was demonstrating, it's as public as it gets, actually. So I just want to throw that out there.
Just to what you just said about the post office, you saying it's
Yeah.
public. Is that
Yeah.
the postal service, like even the post office itself? That's all public. Every level is public. You're
Yes.
saying?
Consider that the real purpose of the post office is, and why it's so important and why it'll never go away, is because it's the only way that government can serve its agents serve as a process. It's the only way you can
Right.
have certified. How you can do certified mail? They're gonna go to UPS or something. No, the post office. The reason the post office, the general post office, what was Ben Franklin, right? The reason it's such a high position is because without the post office, they couldn't serve. They could not serve their agents. That's you. The process is anything that had to do with the person. They couldn't. There'd be no certified mail. There'd be nothing because that only happens in the post. So it's very important to keep that open. And there's a reason they've preserved it. There's a reason they've pre-funded the pension funds and gone into debt. And
Yep.
I mean, there's so much to it that the importance of the post office is paramount. You have to have it.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying. Some people do say, "Oh, well, one's private, one's public." Look, they are subsidiaries of each other, and it's all being funded by public federal money. So,
And by the way, yeah, you can write a bunch of stuff on an envelope. I have several around here that people have sent me, and it's impressive. I'm like, congratulations, you sent me a letter and paid the 3-cent stamp,
Right.
or a package and used 2-cent stamps.
Right.
Great, but it doesn't actually mean that what you sent was private. You're still using a public system of the United States. If you think the post office is not part of the United States, that it somehow exists by itself, well, you're mistaken. And even if it did, it would still be under the jurisdiction of the United States because everything's been executivized.
But Clint, I put the zip code in brackets. It's not on the envelope.
Therefore, I'm not in the zip code.
All right.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, it's not that it's not true. You're okay. Yeah, okay. You've done something legal according to style manuals, and okay, it does not change the fact that if you sent me a big old box of weed that stunk to high hell like weed, and they got it, that you wouldn't get in trouble for using a public service against the rules. I don't know what to say, because even if you send something, you're agreeing to the rules by using the service. This is why use is the highest form of consent. Just using the post office for any reason, you're consenting to the rules.
Right.
So I'm sorry. It's by driving a car, you're consenting to the code.
Yep. Okay, so and by the way, before I answer the next question, I think that's beautifully demonstrating how you can never be traveling and not driving. I'm private in my driving. It's on a public easement, guys.
The hardest part for people of our age of our generation and even before our generation is to understand that traveling did not involve cars because there was no such thing. Remember, my mom, okay, this is how close we are to the generations that didn't have cars. My mom grew up with an outhouse. She didn't
Yeah.
have indoor plumbing. I
Same with
was the
mine.
first kid on my block to have a VCR that wasn't beta, right? You probably don't even know what that even means. CDs, all these different things. And it's amazing the technology that we've gone through and the jumps in technology. That is not travel. Travel is sojourning peacefully from one point to the other. Traveling is not getting in a car and driving on a public road. That's not travel. Okay, traveling is it's more of a it's like living, right? It's traveling. It's something you do. It's not defined as driving. I'm sorry, or
Right.
using a vehicle on a public. No, that's not what is intended. Freedom of speech it was not intended for you to be an a-hole to everybody. It's not intended for you to go around and leave comments on everyone and say you suck. That's
Right.
not what all these freedoms, these franchises, they come with extreme self-governance and self-responsibility. They weren't just put out there so you could be an a-hole to everybody. They're not put out there so that you can, harm people. That's not what this is about. That's not what traveling is. Traveling is something that it's an inherent right, but it doesn't mean a gas guzzling vehicle. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. They don't
Yeah.
build public roads so that you can take a joyride or travel. They build public roads so they can get their products from one foreign trade zone to the next.
But
They can human traffic.
but Clint, I got the MCO and my car's in a trust.
I'll give you an example, okay? One thing that you actually can do, and I think it's pretty cool. I worked on a farm for a long time, and I told the farmer, look, you you got this old truck. You never take it anywhere. You never drive it more than 5 miles. Go get a farm plate. He's like, what's a farm plate? Nobody knows about farm plates, and yet if you have a farm, I mean, I don't even think you need a farm, honestly, and you're not going more than I think 50 miles away from the farm to do your local farm business, you can get a farm plate from the DMV. It is a non-registered vehicle plate. It doesn't require a license. It doesn't require anything because it's part of the farm. It's part of the private entity that you're representing. You're not driving necessarily in person that way, and so you get this plate. It says farm vehicle. They're not going to pull you over, but with the caveat that you're not a jerk, that you don't.
Right.
Still, even when you're driving in a private capacity like that, with go to your DMV and ask them about farm plates or look it up.
Mhm.
You still have to obey the local customs and rules. When in Rome, do as Romans do. This is why we're teaching you how to act in the public through these companies. That you can't act in public without a public figure. A public figure
Right.
is a fiction. It's not you. So it's important to know all this. It's also important not to get religiously carried away with it and say, I'm not going to touch anything artificial. You have to know it, but
Yeah.
don't turn it into a religion per se.
Right.
The other aspect of that is, and I don't know if people know this or not, but farm equipment has right of way. I could technically hop in my tractor and drive on the road and have a crap load of traffic behind me honking at me, and I'd be in the right of way. You can't pull me over. You can't give me a ticket because roads are built for basically everything in the public is built for the higher purpose, and there's a hierarchy of purposes that are called use. Your use as as the lowest class citizen, going to the store, dropping your kids off at school is the lowest commercial use considered. Whereas farming, mining, transportation, that's what the roads are actually built for. The fact that you have the right or privilege to use you should celebrate that, not think, oh, I have a license and I'm a slave. No, you're fortunate to be in a place where you can actually use the public roads. So take advantage of the right that is given to you. Stop fighting such a low level battle that you're never going to win.
Yeah.
But do understand that those higher uses, well, you're not in a higher use. You're trying,
Right.
when you say travel, you don't mean you're in a, you have to get your cows from one farm to the other or whatever. You're not doing a higher use. You're saying I want to drive, I want to go to Disneyland, and therefore I don't need a license. No, that's you got to start thinking higher. You got to start thinking responsibly, and
Yeah.
like I said, these things are kind of self-evident, but it's just that we're never taught, we're never party to it, because we're all such low-level beings in their eyes that you don't learn this in public school unless you're a farmer.
Right. And there's a few things I want to say about driving before I get on to the next question. Thanks for your patience. There's some gurus out there that say, well, if you put my car into trust, then I'm not liable for XYZ that happens if I get pulled over, whatever. That's not true. You're still operating the vessel, right? And so another thing I want to touch on is,
Do no harm.
yeah, and the other thing I want to touch on is, okay, if if I'm driving and I do something reckless, or given probable cause, get pulled over, stuff like that. Look, they have the right to do that. The cops will pull you over because public safety is on the top of under the
The-
easement rights.
the
They
thing
have that
is-
right.
The thing is, Brandon's not arguing that cops are great people and they're wonderful, and no, it's just this is the way it is. And
Right.
until you accept the way it is, you're not going to be able to fit in like we're telling you.
Get in reality, because like we're just showing on last month, Chase. Look what happened to him. Look what happened to David Strait recently. He was driving without a license plate, without a driver's license, and him and his fake wife got put in jail. So yeah, so anyways, just want to throw that out there. Because the driving thing is, again, like we always say, it's the bottom of the totem pole of things you should be worrying about. I mean, blend in. I mean, I don't want to get pulled over. I don't want to waste my time. I have places to be, I have things to do.
And really, I mean, ultimately, the idea is to get to a place where you're not going to need to travel. Most
Right.
people in history never traveled more than 5 miles from 10, 15 miles from where they grew up.
Oh,
They were
yeah.
married to the land. They're supported by the land, and the land supports them. They support the land, their family. There's no reason for you to drive. Right? I mean, you want to be in a position where you don't need to have a vacation from the horrible legal existence, and you don't need a vacation when you're happy and content and live with like-minded people and take care of each other. What are you going to vacate? You want to go into hell? I'm going to take a vacation into legal hell. No, stay in heaven. You've created it. Stay.
Well, another thing too is oh gosh, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, anyways, Beatles side. So yeah, we'll get on to the next question. If I were to start a company selling steel per se, how difficult is it to function in the private while selling a public product? Well, that's not necessarily a public product. So look, the company selling the steel can be private, right? Doesn't matter if you're selling steel. Doesn't have to necessarily be a public product. I'd have to get a more understanding if you're selling it to, stuff like that. But
wouldn't it be a matter of whether the contract is bound in United States law?
well, even then, contracts can be private. So
right.
So yeah, I wouldn't overthink that. The person.
But see, this is why we say you can't. I'm going to say this again. Privacy is not being alone. Okay, acting in private requires at least two parties, two people, two whatever. So it does you no good to be a private company if everybody you're dealing with is in the public. Why not just be a public company, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with a public company in that regard.
No.
It's just, I mean, we're really talking about our livelihood here. We're making ourselves, turning ourselves into the private. And again, it's you that needs to change. It's you that needs to act privately. And in order to do that, you use the various tools that we're talking about.
Right. And again, you can have a public company, but the way that you're managing your property rights and the ownership of the company can be private.
Right.
So that's where a lot of these PMA gurus go wrong. They think, oh, I can't, I can't do that. But look, I mean, exactly how I demonstrate for you guys. So don't get caught up on the way that they got caught up in it.
It's exactly what you just showed with the Bidens and the Trumps.
Oh, exactly. What do they
I
do?
mean,
So, yeah, someone in the chat says, I have a friend with an international stainless steel company. He has all sorts of family trusts. Exactly. And where does the money ultimately go to when they go to pay themselves? Think about that. So, anyways, very well said. Thanks for sharing that. Hope that answers your question, David. And by the way, guys, if you're too shy to display your voice on the chat, ask us a question directly, throw it in the chat. It's fine too. Although it does make better content if you guys ask me directly. So I'll field one more question, if there's any, and then I'm going to get going. If anyone else has another question.
Just curious if you can share a little bit about Mike Gill, what you shared about him being compromised.
Yeah, he's been sitting on the evidence, which he does have good evidence
who's this?
of Mike Gill. He used to be a big mortgage lender. He had the biggest mortgage company in the States at one point. So he knew a lot about how to audit financials. And so he took that knowledge and he audited different shell companies that are being used to launder money by the fentanyl cartels in New Hampshire. So anyways, he tracked all this. He got some evidence. They tried to settle for about, oh gosh, it was a fat sum. I think it was like 50 million or something like that, just to shut him up. He refused to do that. He kept going, but then he hasn't publicly disclosed this information. He's been holding on to it for the longest time.
This is similar to people like Richard Grove, who calls himself a whistleblower, but the judge says you failed to blow the whistle because ultimately they're doing it for self-interest. They're not doing it because they care about you and your family and all. No, they're doing it because they want some payoff or something that, you know, will be in their own self-interest, basically. So whistleblowers, and it's very, very, very strict criteria to actually be a whistleblower, and it's a very selfless thing to be in positions like from my position, that kind of thing. It's not, you know, it's not a self-interest thing. And so, yeah, if he's holding on to the evidence or whatever, that's not whistleblowing, or that's not, yeah.
And Mike Gill,
and the law agrees.
He's staying at a hotel only a few miles away from many federal headquarters of various agencies. And by the way, the same hotel is used to house informants and those that are compromising and working with these federal agencies. So again, you know, Brendan O'Connell, the guy that created the video I shared earlier, he actually shared phone calls he had with Mike. Mike is being very strange lately. It's all very odd.
I think you have to remember too that the public sector, the public government and the public sector really is there to protect the interests of the private people who created and run it.
Right.
So even if you had overwhelming evidence, for instance, 9/11, right? Overwhelming evidence, even on video, it's still not enough to take someone like George Bush down or something. You know, all the players involved and all the knowledge, it's not enough. And you have to have chain of custody and chain of evidence and this and that. There's so much to it. A dossier you can send into the FBI. You don't just you don't just go and say, "Hey, judge, I have a YouTube video that proves this and that."
Yeah, and
You're
that's
gonna,
another
they're gonna
thing.
laugh at you.
Mike was trying to shoot from the hip. He didn't do all the proper procedures. He didn't do all this kind of stuff. And even if he did all that, again, the judges, they're compromised. They're easily bought. Um, so, anyways, that's my little take on Mike Dale.
And they're part of several private associations,
Oh,
including
absolutely.
the bar.
Right. The bar, the Masons.
Problem.
Yeah. So,
Big
anyways,
problem.
well, all right, guys. Well, that was an interesting one. Hope you had some fun takeaways from that, especially about the LLCs.
Hey,
So,
and as far as I'm concerned, the point of this was proof of concept here. I mean, this should
right.
really make you understand when you consider Trump and Biden the difference between how much Trump gets raked through the coals, and why we only hear of the Biden mystery but never really get it revealed. Well, there's no public documents; they're not in the public.
Yeah, exactly. And I think some people, especially when I get on Call of Duty, guys, some of you guys feel a little uneasy about getting into this. You're like, is this illegal? It's not. The whole point is to play in the sandbox. And this exactly demonstrates this stuff isn't illegal.
Well, I mean, let's be clear. Some things would be illegal if you were operating in a jurisdiction that it was illegal. The idea is to be foreign or private from that jurisdiction, where it's not illegal. I mean, getting married without a license is illegal. Does that make sense to you? So get married privately.
Right. And we are going to be rolling out something for that, guys. Be anticipating that. Because I'm certainly never going to get a legal marriage. We'll get into why and what we can do for solutions. And it's not to screw anyone over. We're going to be fair. We're not going to, we're going to make people whole if you guys end up separating in the private marriage. It's not to get out of, paying your private spouse.
And on that note, just so you're aware, if anybody does go through the process, there's a big difference between divorce and annulment. Okay. Divorce is where the two persons that became one person in marriage separate, become two persons again, but the corporation that is the marriage still exists. Therefore, the male, the head of household or the head of corporation, is still responsible for all the agents. Its principal is responsible for all the agents, so you got to pay child support and all that.
Right.
Whereas an annulment ends the contract, ends the corporation. By corporation, I mean, like I said, incorporating something together, butter and salt or whatever, butter and sugar to make cookies. You're incorporating two persons together. Well, this separates everything. The annulment, if you just look up the term, actually ends the contractual obligation of the head of household. Now that's what you should be going for. And the problem is, is the wife going to agree to an annulment? Probably. It's going to take some serious explanation, or some, you could annul and have a private contract between you that the you still love the person, the woman. You could agree to a reasonable contractual situation where you pay child support. You don't have to do it through divorce. Divorce lawyers love divorce, right? But they don't promote annulment.
The only thing we're divorcing is the family court in this thing I'm going to roll out. So be on the lookout for that, guys. And again, it's going to make it so that when you present it to your significant other, it's not going to scare them away. In fact, it should actually, if they're thinking the right way, it should excite them. So,
but you're assuming that anyone out there is in their right mind. That's the problem.
So be on the lookout for that, guys. So we're gonna end it here. Clint, where can they find you right now?
All the usual spots. I do have my site.
Yes.
Privateunderground.club. You can join it, but I haven't put any of the benefits up yet. In fact, I've been spending days and days collecting all my old work so that it's in a downloadable file.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
For members, and then I'm about to put out the first part of the book in in voiceover form. and whatever else I do from now on is going to be on that site, aside from a couple of videos that I'll put out. But you know, it's you can still go to Red Pill Sunday School. There's so much information
Yeah.
on just that channel that it can occupy you for years.
Right.
So
Yeah. So yeah, join Clint's PMA website now, and that'll be up and running, or it actually is. So go ahead and check it out. You can find my work on my website, safe-havenco.com. You can book a 15-minute consultation with me that's complimentary. That way I can get a full view of your situation and all the caveats involved with that, what your goals are. So it's a little more involved. It's private conversation.
you should be. Because,
Right.
again, privacy is secrecy, right?
Yeah. Some of you have already taken advantage of that are on here, but yeah. So anyways, and then you can find all of my videos. Not all of them are in my YouTube. My YouTube, Safe Haven Portfolio Management. Go ahead and check that out. Lots of good information there, but a lot of the meat is going to be on my Telegram. That's Safe Haven, PMA. The QR code is going to be listed on this recording. So go on there, check that out. Full resources.
And for anybody that's been following me for a while, the reason I have a PMA and trusts and all that stuff is this little squirt right here. So there you have it.
How about a last quick one before you close?
Mhm.
All right, we can squeeze one in.
Thank you so much. Love the show, guys. Just the question is, the first name last, legal name, if it were reversed, is that still the name of the surety?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, people used to sign with an X, if that tells you anything. It's your intent, and the maxims of the law, again, agree with that. It doesn't really
Exactly.
matter.
And when he says X, that's what they would accept for illiterate people typically.
Yeah. And
So-
unfortunately, we speak a language of illiteracy.
Right.
They call it English or Dog Latin under the law Latin, which is the highest. So we're considered illiterate in that sense. And yeah, a lot of that is patriot mythology.
Yes.
It's style. It's not anything that's really relevant. Another aspect of that is there's the U.S. and the USA. Those are styles. Actually, there's an organization, a company, basically, a whatever you call it, organization that actually internationally it's USA, but here it's US or whatever it is. So they're naming conventions for the most part. So the fact that you are using a surname is the problem. Your first name is your Christian name. The last name is your surname. Last means, for all intents and purposes, last will and testament. It's your intent. So if you're using a last name or a surname, family name, cognomen, whatever you call it, in the legal, it's an attachment or an addiction, and you're therefore creating a what's known as a person or a status.
Yep.
You're not being yourself or a man of God or whatever. So a lot of that stuff it's completely irrelevant to anything. It's all about your intent. And like I said, the maxims of law are very clear that a misspelled name does not dismiss anything, and it's I hate the fact that there's all this BS, and it really is confusing, because I went through all that too, and I was just the kind of guy that wanted to verify it, and make sure it was true. And I'm like, wait a minute, none of this is true, and then none of this actually applies. It's very different than I thought.
Yeah.
So yeah, but remember, the idea here is not to use either. You don't use your Christian name, and you don't use your surname, and you certainly don't use it together. You're not using your name. That's how you remain unattached to these things. So that's the brilliant part. It's also hard because, remember, you don't own it. It's like you want to be able to say, it's mine, I own the property rights, but But remember, that's the Rockefeller thing, man. Own
Yep.
nothing but control it.
Yeah, so all these
That's
people
so
saying,
hard.
take control of your straw man. That's a dangerous route to go. That's probably a whole nother video, Clint. We're
Well, I
actually just
mean,
talking about that. That's not your
technically,
property.
technically, you are in control of your straw man. You're the one using it.
Well,
You're the one offering it. You're in
right,
control of it, which means you can, but you don't own it.
right. That's not your property.
Right?
Yeah.
So stop using it. Stop controlling it. Stop. Put it away. Stop using it unless you actually have to.
Start a new one that you can control. That's the whole point of using the new persons that we talk
I mean,
about.
how often, for instance, do you use a license and insurance? Once a year, maybe someone will ask you for it, right?
If that,
Yeah,
so, yeah, it's not a big
tech-
deal. I mean,
Yeah, so
gosh,
I mean, it's attached to the person, not you. Are you using the
Right.
person? Well, so
right. You can't get pulled over and say, "Well, I'm a trust. I'm not." All caps.
no, you're not a trust. You're never ever anything but a man who's using some tool, whether that's a person, a company, a trust, whatever
right.
it is.
So yeah, one more thing in the chat. We're gonna end it. Aren't all marriages literally corporate merges from Roman de facto? Look, we're not talking about a marriage. We're talking about an association. And just wait, guys. There's gonna be a whole video on that. So that's a good question though. But anyways, guys, well, thanks for joining everyone. And this recording will be posted for those that missed it. So until then, guys, I will see you next week. And everyone have a good rest of your evening.